wind did not just blow in Iron Ridge, it scoured. It came screaming down from the blind white peaks of the distant Rockies, gathering speed across 200 miles of short grass prairie until it hit the ramshackle buildings of the town like a physical blow. It drove grit into the eyes of horses and stripped the paint from the false-fronted stores on Main Street, leaving them gray and skeletal against the vast, bruising purple of the twilight sky. Iron Ridge sat on the edge of the high plains in the Dakota Territory, a cluster of wood and ambition huddled against the emptiness. It was a place where winter arrived early and stayed late, and where the silence of the land was so heavy that men drank themselves into a stupor just to stop listening to it. In the center of this wind-battered settlement, the Golden Steer Saloon glowed like an infected wound. Yellow lantern light spilled from its dirty windows, pooling on the wooden boardwalk where the frost was already beginning to knit the dust together. Lily Hart paused outside the batwing doors, shivering in a coat that had been thinned 2 years ago and was now little more than a rag. She pulled the collar up, trying to shield her throat, but the cold found its way in, just as the dust did. She could feel the grit of it between her teeth, a constant reminder of where she was. 3 years ago, she had been Mrs. Hart, the schoolteacher's wife in a green valley 300 miles south. She had owned a lace tablecloth and books with leather bindings. She had walked to a schoolhouse with a bell that rang clear in the morning air. Now, she was just Lily, the woman who sang for whiskey money in a place where the law was as loose as the shingles on the roof. She forced herself to breathe. The air smelled of wood smoke, manure, and the sharp, metallic tang of coming snow. "You do what you must to live," she told herself. It was a mantra she repeated every night before she pushed through these doors. She stepped inside. The warmth hit her first, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale beer, and cheap tobacco. Then came the noise, the scrape of boots, the clatter of glass, the low rumble of male voices that dipped and paused as she entered. Heads turned. They always did. Lily kept her chin high, her eyes fixed on the piano in the corner. She knew what they saw. She was 28, her face too thin, her hands roughened by lye soap and cold water, but she still carried the ghost of the beauty she had once been. Her hair was the color of dark honey, pulled back severely. Those strays always escaped to frame a face that held too much shadow. She felt the eyes on her back. It was not admiration. It was a hungry, predatory assessment. To the respectable women of the town, the merchants' wives who crossed the street when they saw her coming, she was a stain, a warning of what happened when a woman lost her protection. To the men in the saloon, she was something that had not yet been claimed, a piece of fruit hanging just out of reach, ripening toward rot. She made her way to the small platform near the piano. The piano player, a consumptive man named Silas, who had lost 2 fingers in the war, gave her a brief, pitying nod. Lily did not look at the tables. If she looked, she might see the hunger, or worse, the recognition. Instead, she began to arrange her small stack of sheet music, her fingers trembling just enough that she had to press them flat against the wood. The door swung open again, letting in a gust of freezing air that made the lantern flames dance. Cole Mercer stepped out of the night and into the haze. He was a tall man, built like the ridges that bordered his land, hard, unyielding, and silent. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat that had seen more winters than most of the men in the room, and his hat was pulled low, casting a shadow over eyes that were the color of flint. He did not look around the room with the restless energy of the cowboys or the nervous darting of the drifters. He stood still, letting the room settle around him. Cole was 35, though the sun and the wind had carved lines into his face that made him look older. A scar ran along his jawline, a jagged white memory of a knife fight in a cattle camp 10 years gone. He walked with the heavy, deliberate gait of a man who spent 18 hours a day in the saddle. He moved to the far end of the bar, away from the loud poker game near the stove. The bartender poured him a whiskey without asking. Cole put a coin on the wood, silver, not script, and turned to face the room, his back against the polished mahogany. He saw her immediately. It was hard not to. In a room of brown wool and gray smoke, Lily's heart was a pale, fragile stillness. Cole took a sip of the burning liquor and watched her over the rim of his glass. He had watched her for months, though he had never spoken more than 10 words to her. He had seen the way her dress hung looser on her frame as the autumn deepened. He had seen the way she flinched when the miners got too loud, a minute tightening of her shoulders that spoke of a fear she tried desperately to hide. It made him angry, and the anger surprised him. He did not want to care about the singer with the sad eyes. He had his own land, his own battles. He was a man of mixed blood in a territory that barely tolerated him because his herd was large and his aim was true. His mother had been Cheyenne. His father a white trapper who had died when Cole was 12. Cole carried his heritage in the high cut of his cheekbones and the dark tone of his skin, and he carried the town's prejudice like a stone in his gut. He knew what it was to be looked at as if you were something less than human. He saw the townsfolk look at Lily the same way he had been looked at his whole life, as something that did not belong, something that could be used or discarded without consequence. Across the room, in the darkest corner booth, Ben Trask sat with Sheriff Mallory. Trask was a heavy man with a face like rising dough and eyes that were small and wet. He owned the Golden Steer, the livery stable, and half the debt in Iron Ridge. The sheriff, a thin man with a nervous tick in his left eyelid, swirled his beer and nodded at something Trask was saying. Cole caught the drift of their voices through a lull in the noise. "Train comes through on Tuesday," Trask was saying, his voice a low rumble. "The trader from Chicago pays in gold. Mallory, not credit, gold. She is a local." "Ben," the sheriff mumbled, looking into his mug. "People know her name. People know she is a widow with no kin and a debt she cannot pay." Trask sneered. "She is livestock, same as the rest, just prettier." Cole's hand tightened on his glass. The whiskey turned sour in his mouth. He looked back at the stage. Lily was singing now, a ballad about a lost soldier. Her voice was thin but clear, cutting through the smoke like a silver wire. It was a beautiful sound, and it sounded entirely alone. When her set ended, the applause was scattered and lewd. A miner in the front row whistled and shouted a suggestion that made Lily stiffen. She stepped off the platform, eyes on the floor, heading toward the back room where she kept her coat. "Lily!" Trask's voice boomed. He did not shout, but the authority in it cut through the din. "My office, now!" Lily froze. She looked toward the bar, her gaze sweeping past Cole without seeing him, and then turned toward the owner. She walked to his table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her dress. "Mr. Trask," she said. Her voice was low, steady. "I was just going to take a break." Trask stood up, his bulk looming over her. "We need to discuss your tab, Mrs. Hart. Come with me." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked heavily toward the office door at the back of the saloon. Lily hesitated, glancing at the sheriff. Mallory stared studiously at the foam on his beer. She followed Trask. Cole finished his whiskey in one swallow. He set the glass down with a click that was lost in the noise. He waited a count of 10, then pushed off the bar and walked toward the back hallway. The door to the office was ajar. Cole stopped in the shadows of the corridor, leaning against the rough-hewn wall. He could hear them clearly. $40, Trask was saying. The sound of a ledger slamming shut echoed. "Room, board, that dress you are wearing. You have paid back $4 in 2 months. The winter has been hard." Lily's voice trembled. "The tips are not what they were. I need more time, Mr. Trask, just until spring. I can work at the livery during the day. I can scrub floors." "I do not need a scrub woman," Trask said. "I have a business proposition. There is a man coming through on the Tuesday supply train. He represents a house in St. Louis. High class, silk sheets. You would do well there." There was a silence, sudden and absolute. "You want to sell me?" Lily whispered. The horror in her voice was thick enough to choke on. "To a brothel." "I am selling your debt," Trask corrected smoothly. "You work it off there. It is better than starving here. Lily, look at you. You are skin and bone. No, she said. I will not go. You cannot make me. You have no money, Trask said, his voice dropping, becoming harder. You have no family. You have no husband. You are a vagrant in the eyes of the law, and vagrants go where they are told. I am not a vagrant, her voice rose. I was a teacher. There was the sound of a scuffle, a sharp intake of breath, and then a dull thud, as if someone had been shoved against a wall. You were, Trask snarled. Now you are mine. Cole stepped into the doorway. Trask had Lily by the wrist, twisting her arm up behind her back. Lily's face was white, her eyes squeezed shut, tears leaking from the corners. Let her go. Ben, Cole said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the flat, metallic ring of a hammer hitting an anvil. Trask jumped, releasing Lily. She stumbled back, clutching her wrist, gasping for air. She looked at Cole, her eyes wide with shock and a sudden, desperate hope. Trask smoothed his vest, his face flushing red. This is a private conversation. Mercer, get back to your cows. I heard what you said, Cole said, stepping into the small room. He filled the space, making it feel suffocatingly small. You are not shipping her anywhere. Trask laughed, a wet, rattling sound. Is that so? You going to pay her tab? Half-breed? You going to play hero? He stepped closer to Cole, sneering. She is 4 months behind. Unless you have $50 in gold in your pocket, she goes on that train, and you know the law. Sheriff Mallory signed the transfer order this morning. Cole looked at Lily. She was pressing herself against the filing cabinet, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. She looked at him, begging without words. But $50 was a fortune. It was the price of 3 good horses. It was more than most men in Iron Ridge saw in a year. Cole had money, but it was tied up in feed and fencing for the winter. He did not have $50 in his pocket. You are a son of a bitch, Trask, Cole said. I am a businessman, Trask replied, smiling now. Get out of my office, unless you want to explain to the sheriff why you are trespassing. Cole looked at Trask, measuring the distance to the man's throat. He wanted to hit him. He wanted to tear this whole rotten building down board by board. But violence would only get him thrown in a cell. And then Lily would be truly alone. He looked at Lily one last time. Her eyes were searching his, waiting for him to save her. I will be back, he said to Trask. He turned and walked out. He heard Lily's small, strangled sound behind him, a sound like a bird hitting a window. She thought he was leaving her. She thought he was just another man who had looked at her plight and decided it cost too much to fix. Cole walked back into the main room, his vision red at the edges. He needed money. He needed it tonight. He walked to the poker table. The game was high stakes tonight, cattlemen from the northern range waiting out the storm. Cole pulled out his chair and sat down. He had $70 in silver in his saddlebags outside. Money meant for the new bull he needed in the spring. He would gamble the bull. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of cards and smoke. Cole played with a cold, ruthless focus. He did not drink. He did not speak. He watched the cards, and he watched the office door. Trask had sent Lily back out to sing. She stood on the stage, her face like a porcelain mask. She sang songs of home and hearth, songs that made the drunk men weep, while her own life crumbled beneath her feet. She did not look at Cole. She did not look at anyone. She looked like a woman who had already died and was just waiting for her body to stop moving. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes. At 10 o'clock, Ben Trask walked to the center of the room. He raised his hands for silence. The piano stopped. The room quieted, save for the whistling of the draft. Gentlemen, Trask bellowed, smiling his oily smile. A special announcement tonight. Our lovely Lily, the bird of Iron Ridge, will be leaving us on Tuesday. A murmur went through the crowd. She has been offered a fine position in the city. Trask lied, his voice dripping with false cheer. A place where her talents will be fully appreciated. Someone in the back laughed. What kind of talents? Ben. How much she gonna cost there? Another man shouted. Lily stood on the stage, freezing. Her cheeks burned with a sudden, violent flush of shame. She gripped the edge of the piano, her knuckles white. Trask was stripping her naked with his words, peeling away the last shred of dignity she had managed to hoard. "So let us drink a toast," Trask shouted, raising a glass. "To Lily and her new career." The room erupted in laughter and jeers. Men raised their glasses. They looked at her not as a woman, but as a joke, a commodity. Cole threw his cards down. He had won the last hand. The pile of silver and notes in front of him was substantial. He stood up. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floorboards, a harsh screech that cut through the laughter. He grabbed the pile of money in one large hand and walked to the center of the room. He moved with a violence that silenced the nearest tables. He stopped in front of Trask. He did not look at the saloon keeper. He looked up at Lily. Her eyes met his, wide and terrified. Cole slammed the money onto the nearest table. The sound was like a gunshot. Coins spun and danced on the wood. $60, Cole shouted. His voice was a thundercrack in the sudden silence. "Gold and silver." Trask stared at the money. "What is this? Mercer?" Cole turned to the room. He had to do this. He had to make it irrevocable. He had to make it so that no man in this town would ever think they could touch her again without answering to him. He had to speak their language. "I am buying her debt," Cole snarled, his voice rough and loud, reaching every corner of the room. "And I am taking her," he pointed a calloused finger at Lily. "She is done singing for you, filth." Cole shouted, "She belongs to me now." The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the saloon. Lily reeled back as if he had struck her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at him, horror dawning in her eyes. She heard what the men heard. She heard a claim. She heard a man buying a woman. "You cannot," she whispered, the words lost in the rising murmur of the crowd. Trask looked at the money, then at Cole. Greed warred with pride in his face. Greed won. He reached out and scooped up the coins. "Done," Trask said, grinning. "She is all yours. Mercer, just get her out of my place." Cole did not wait. He stormed up the 2 steps to the stage. He did not ask her. He did not explain. He reached out and grabbed her upper arm. His grip was iron hard. "Come on," he grated out. Lily snapped out of her shock. She dug her heels in, grabbing the piano leg with her free hand. "No," she hissed at him. "Let me go." "How could you? I thought you were distinct." Cole didn't look at her. He couldn't. If he looked at the betrayal in her eyes, he would falter. "It is done." "Lily," he said coldly, "you are coming with me." "I am not a horse," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You cannot buy me." "I just did," Cole said. He yanked her arm, breaking her hold on the piano. He pulled her off the stage, half dragging her through the sawdust on the floor. The crowd parted for them, a sea of stunned faces. Then the shock broke. "That is it! Cole!" someone shouted. "Ride her hard!" "Check her teeth first," another man yelled. Laughter, cruel and raucous, chased them. It washed over Lily like filthy water. She stumbled, trying to fight him, beating her free hand against his heavy coat. It was like hitting a stone wall. He did not stop. He did not slow down. He marched her toward the door, his jaw set so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. He kicked the bat-wing doors open and dragged her out into the night. The cold hit them instantly, a shock of ice after the heat of the saloon. The wind was screaming now, tearing at Lily's dress, whipping her hair across her face. Cole didn't stop until they reached the hitching rail where his black gelding stood, head down against the gale. "Let me go!" Lily screamed, the wind tearing the words from her mouth. She wrenched her arm, slipping on the icy boardwalk. "You beast! You are worse than them! You are worse than all of them!" Cole spun her around, pinning her against the side of the horse. The animal shifted nervously, but Cole held it steady with one hand while he held Lily with the other. "Get up!" he ordered. "No!" She was crying now, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Where are you taking me? I will not go to your bed. I will die first." Cole looked down at her, in the starlight. His face was a mask of shadows. He looked terrifying. He looked like the savage the town whispered he was. He didn't explain. He couldn't explain that Trask would send the sheriff after her in 10 minutes if she wasn't gone. He couldn't explain that this was the only way to break the legal hold they had on her. "Get up," he said again, his voice flat. He didn't wait for her to comply. He grabbed her by the waist and hoisted her up. Lily kicked and struggled, but she was weak from months of hunger, and he was strong with a lifetime of hard labor. He deposited her into the saddle. Before she could slide off the other side, he swung up behind her. He wrapped one arm around her waist, pinning her to him, effectively trapping her. "Quiet," he growled in her ear. He kicked the horse. The gelding lunged forward, eager to move and generate heat. They clattered down Main Street, past the saloon where the laughter still echoed, past the dark storefronts, past the sleeping houses of the people who had watched Lily fall and done nothing to catch her. Lily sat rigid in the circle of his arm. Her humiliation had calcified into a cold, hard rage. She felt dirty. She felt ruined. The entire town had seen Cole Mercer buy her. They had seen him drag her out like a prize he had won at a fair. There was no going back now. The schoolteacher was dead. The respectable widow was dead. There was only this, a woman stolen in the night, riding into the wasteland with a man she did not know. They left the town behind. The lights of Iron Ridge faded into tiny pinpricks and then vanished. There was only the vast, crushing darkness of the plains. Above them, the sky was a sheet of black ice, spattered with hard, cold stars that looked down with total indifference. Cole stared straight ahead, his eyes watering from the wind. He felt the stiffness of her body against his. He felt her shivering, though he didn't know if it was from cold or hate. He remembered the time the town council had told him his mother couldn't be buried in the church cemetery. He remembered the feeling of helplessness, of being small and brown and worthless in the face of their rules. He had sworn then that he would never be powerless again. He had saved her. He knew that. But as the wind howled around them, carrying them deeper into the empty night, Cole Mercer wondered if he had saved her only to destroy her himself. He clicked his tongue to the horse, and they rode on into the dark. The light came before the heat, a pale, bruised violet bleeding up from the eastern horizon to wash out the stars. It revealed the world in jagged outlines, the spine of the distant mountains, the hunched shapes of scrub brush, and the endless, rolling ocean of frost-silvered grass that stretched until it vanished into the gray sky. Lily Hart woke with a gasp, her body jerking as if falling from a great height. She was not in her bed at the boarding house. She was not on the stage at the Golden Steer. She was on the hard earth, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled of horse sweat and wood smoke. Memory returned like a slap to the face. The saloon, the shouting, the heavy weight of coins hitting the table, the humiliating grip of Cole Mercer's hand on her arm as he dragged her out into the dark. She sat up, the blanket falling away from her shoulders. The cold was immediate and biting, slicing through her thin dress. Every inch of her body ached. Her legs felt bruised from the miles of riding double, her skin wind-chapped and raw. A few yards away, a small fire popped and hissed, feeding on dry sagebrush. Cole Mercer crouched beside it, his back to her. He was melting snow in a battered tin coffee pot. He looked as immovable as the boulders that littered the plains, a dark shape against the rising light. Lily scrambled to her feet. Her boots slipped on the icy ground, but she caught her balance, her hands curling into fists at her sides. The fear that had paralyzed her the night before had crystallized into a sharp, vibrating anger. "You," she said. Her voice was a rasp, wrecked by the cold and the screaming wind. Cole did not turn. He kept his eyes on the fire, adding a handful of coffee grounds to the water. "Coffee will be ready in a minute," he said. His voice was low, flat, devoid of the shouting rage he had shown in the saloon. "I do not want your coffee," Lily snapped. Stepping closer, the wind whipped her hair across her face, but she did not brush it away. "I want an explanation. I want to know why I'm here." Cole stood up slowly. He turned to face her. In the daylight, he looked exhausted, There were dark smudges beneath his eyes, and the scar on his jaw stood out stark and white against his skin. He looked at her not with lust or triumph, but with a weary resignation that confused her. "I told you last night," he said. "I bought the debt." "You bought me," Lily corrected him, her voice rising. "You stood in front of the whole town and traded gold for a woman. You shamed me, Mr. Mercer. You took what little pride I had left and you threw it in the dirt." Cole flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening around the eyes, but she saw it. "Trask was selling you east," Cole said. He gestured vaguely toward the horizon. "To a house in St. Louis. The deal was done. Lily, the sheriff signed the paper. If I had not stepped in, you would be on a wagon with a slaver by Tuesday. So you saved me?" Lily laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Is that what you call it? Dragging me out by my hair? Calling me your woman? Taking me to the middle of nowhere?" "I did what I had to do," Cole said stubbornly. "I had to make it look real. I had to make Trask believe I was claiming you, or he would have fought it. He would have raised the price or sent the law after us." "And now?" Lily demanded. She hugged her arms around herself, shivering violently. "What happens now? Am I your property? Do I serve you now instead of the saloon patrons?" Cole's face darkened. The hurt was plain there now, mixing with the anger. He looked at her as if she had struck him. "I'm not Ben Trask," he said roughly, "and I'm not those men in the saloon. You are safe here. No one touches you. No one sells you." "Safe," Lily repeated with scorn. "I am freezing. I am ruined. My name is Mud in Iron Ridge, and I am alone on the prairie with a man who thinks he owns me." Cole took a step toward her, and Lily stepped back, her eyes wide. He stopped instantly, raising a hand palm out. "I do not own you," he said. The words were heavy, difficult for him. "But you cannot go back. You know that. You go back to Iron Ridge, and Trask has you. Or the town runs you out for for what happened last night." Lily fell silent. The truth of it settled on her like a heavy cloak. He was right. The moment he had slapped that money down and she had left with him, the door to her old life had slammed shut. To the town, she was a fallen woman, the mistress of the reclusive, dangerous rancher. If she walked back into town now, she would be spat upon. Or worse, Trask would simply take her by force. "So what is the choice?" she whispered. "Starve here or rot there?" Cole looked at the fire, then back at her. He seemed to be wrestling with a thought, turning it over in his mind to find the edges of it. "I need a housekeeper," he said. He did not look at her when he said it. He looked at the horizon. "My place. It is not fit for company. I am out on the range from dawn to dusk. I need someone to cook, wash, keep the place from falling down." He looked back at her, his dark eyes intense. "You work for me, paid work. I will pay you $10 a month and room and board. You save your money. When you have enough to go somewhere new, somewhere far from here, where no one knows your name, you go, I will ride you to the train myself." Lily stared at him. $10 a month was a fortune compared to the scraps she made singing. It was a way out, a real way out. But she looked at his hands, large, scarred, capable of violence. She looked at the pistol on his hip. She remembered the stories the women whispered about the half-breed rancher who lived like a wolf in the hills. "And the sleeping arrangements?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "You take the bedroom." Cole said, "I will sleep in the loft or the barn. I give you my word. Lily, I will not touch you. We are not together. It is business." Lily studied him. She saw a man who was uncomfortable in his own skin, a man who stood with the defensive posture of someone used to being attacked. But she also saw that he had made coffee. She saw that he had given her the blanket while he had slept in his coat. She had no real choice, but she could pretend she did. She could carve out a sliver of dignity. "I have terms," she said. Cole nodded once. "Name them." "I cook and I clean." Lily said, "I do not warm your bed. I do not entertain your friends. And if you ever lay a hand on me in anger or in lust, I will kill you in your sleep. Mr. Mercer, I swear it on my mother's Bible." Cole looked at her, and for a second, A ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It vanished as quickly as it came. "Fair enough," he said. "Drink the coffee. We have 3 hours of riding left." The ranch lay in the bottom of a wide, shallow bowl of land, sheltered from the worst of the north wind by a ridge of craggy limestone. It was not the grand estate of a cattle baron. It was a working claim, etched out of the unforgiving earth by sheer will. The house was built of rough-hewn logs chinked with mud and straw, squat and solid. A barn, leaning slightly to the west, stood nearby, surrounded by a maze of corrals and fencing that stretched out into the distance. As they rode into the yard, the silence of the place pressed down on Lily. There was no sound of church bells, no murmur of neighbors, no rattle of wagons. There was only the wind, whistling endlessly through the gaps in the fences, and the distant, mournful lowing of cattle. The nearest neighbor was 20 miles away. The isolation felt physical, a wall of empty air separating them from the rest of the world. It felt protective. Yes, Trask could not reach her here easily, but it also felt suffocating. If anything happened here, if Cole broke his word, no one would ever hear her scream. Cole swung down from his horse and offered a hand to help her. Lily ignored it, sliding down awkwardly on her own. Her legs nearly buckled when her boots hit the dirt, but she grabbed the stirrup leather to hold herself upright. "Go inside," Cole said, taking the reins of his horse. "I have to see to the stock." He led the horse toward the barn without looking back. Lily walked to the house. The front steps were creaky, the wood gray and weathered. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. She stood in the center of the main room, and her heart sank. It was a man's house, in the worst sense. Dust lay thick on every surface, gray and fuzzy like a second skin. The curtains were torn and hung askew, letting in brutal shafts of light that illuminated the grime. A pile of dirty tin plates sat on a table stained with grease. A pair of muddy boots lay kicked in the corner. It smelled of stale tobacco, wood ash, and neglect. It was the home of a man who spent his life outside, who came here only to sleep and eat, viewing the walls as nothing more than a shelter from the rain. Lily felt a wave of despair so strong it nearly knocked her over. This was her life now? This squalor? Then she looked at the dirty plates. She looked at the floor that needed sweeping. She took a deep breath. She took off her thin coat and hung it on a nail by the door. She rolled up the sleeves of her dress. Cleaning was something she understood. Cleaning was order. Cleaning was a way to take a chaotic, frightening world and force it into lines and rows. If she was to be a housekeeper, she would be the best housekeeper this godforsaken territory had ever seen. Not for him, for herself, to prove that she was not just debris swept up by the wind. She found a bucket and a rag, and she went to work. 2 hours later, Lily stepped out onto the porch to shake out a rug. Her hands were gray with dust, and her back ached. But the main room behind her was swept, and the table was scrubbed down to the grain of the wood. A commotion by the corral caught her eye. Cole was there. He had changed into a canvas work shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He was in the round pen with a horse, a large roan stallion that looked more monster than animal. The horse was rearing, hooves slashing the air, eyes rolling white with panic and rage. Lily froze, clutching the rug to her chest. She expected Cole to strike the animal, to use a whip or a heavy hand like the men at the livery stable in town. But Cole stood his ground. He held a long lead rope, but he did not pull on it. He spoke to the horse, a low, steady stream of words that Lily could not hear but felt in the vibration of the air. The horse lunged at him, teeth bared. Cole sidestepped with a fluid, liquid grace, moving like water around a stone. He did not flinch. He did not retreat. He waited. When the horse stopped, heaving and sweating, Cole took a step forward. The horse flinched. Cole stopped. He waited again. Lily watched, fascinated and uneasy. She saw the scars on his arms now, white lines against the brown skin. She saw the way he moved. Careful, deliberate, respectful of the danger, but not ruled by it. He was like the land itself, harsh, silent, and enduring. After what felt like an hour, the horse lowered its head. It let out a long, shuddering breath. Cole reached out slowly and touched the animal's neck. The horse shivered but did not pull away. Cole Mercer had a gentleness in his hands that he kept hidden from people. Lily realized, with a jolt of surprise, that he treated the beast with more patience than he had treated her. Or perhaps, he understood the beast better. He understood fear and wildness. He did not understand a woman in a silk dress who quoted poetry. He looked up then, across the yard, and saw her watching him. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. There was no nod, no wave, just a shared acknowledgement of presence. Cole turned back to the horse, and Lily turned back to the house, her heart beating a strange, uneven rhythm. The days that followed fell into a brutal, exhausting pattern. Morning arrived not with the sun, but with the biting cold that seeped through the cracks in the logs. Lily was up before dawn, breaking the ice on the water basin to wash her face. The shock of the cold water was the only thing that woke her fully. Her hands, once soft enough to turn the pages of books without snagging, became red and chapped. Her fingernails broke. Her skin felt permanently dry, scoured by the lye soap and the prairie wind. She hauled water from the pump in the yard, the heavy buckets dragging her shoulders down until she thought her arms would pull from their sockets. She chopped vegetables with fingers that were numb and clumsy. She scrubbed Cole's heavy canvas shirts on a washboard until her knuckles bled. At night, the coyotes howled. It was a lonely, yipping sound that made the hair on her arms stand up. It sounded like hunger given a voice. Every task was a reminder of how far she had fallen. As she peeled potatoes one afternoon, looking out at the gray expanse of the plains, the memory took her. She was back in the farmhouse in Ohio. The light was golden there, filtered through the leaves of the oak tree. She was holding the small, knitted cap she had made. Then the pain, the blood, the terrible, cramping emptiness that followed. She remembered the doctor's face, pitying and dismissive. "Some women are just not built to carry life. Mrs. Hart, it is a weakness in the Constitution." She remembered the silence of the cradle in the corner. And then, after Thomas died in the thresher accident, the whispers, the way the town matrons looked at her flat stomach and whispered barren, the way the local banker, a man with wandering hands and a pious smile, had cornered her in the vestry when she had refused him. He had told everyone she had seduced him. "A woman who cannot bear children is prone to unnatural urges," they had said. The scandal had burned through her life like a prairie fire. She had lost the farm. She had lost her friends. She had fled west, running from the shame, only to find that shame had longer legs than she did. The knife slipped, nicking her thumb. Lily hissed, sticking the digit in her mouth. The metallic taste of blood brought her back to the present. She looked at the rough walls of Cole's cabin. She was still running. She was still the barren widow, the scandal, the woman of no value. The door opened, and Cole walked in, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He stopped when he saw her sucking her thumb, saw the blood on the potato. He didn't say anything. He walked to the cupboard, took out a strip of clean rag, and placed it on the table beside her. Then he walked to the stove to pour himself coffee. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not offer to bandage it. He simply provided the means for her to fix it herself. It was infuriating. It was also, strangely, a relief. He did not look at her with pity. "Supper in an hour," Lily said, wrapping the rag around her thumb. Her voice was cool, professional, obliged. Cole grunted. Cole's story did not come in a flood, but in drops, leaked out during the quiet moments between chores. Lily learned that his father had been a trapper named Silas Mercer, a man who loved the mountains more than civilization. His mother was named Morning Star. "She died of the smallpox when I was 10, Cole said one evening. He was mending a bridle by the firelight, his hands working the leather with practiced ease. "My father took me to his people in Kansas, his brother's family." "They took you in?" Lily asked. She was darning a sock, sitting in the rocking chair she had dragged down from the loft. Cole snorted. They took me in. I slept in the barn. I ate on the porch. My uncle called me his charity case. My aunt called me worse. He looked up, the firelight catching the hard angles of his face. I learned early that to half the world, I am a savage. To the other half, I am a traitor. You fit nowhere, so you make your own place. And the violence? Lily asked. She hadn't meant to ask it, but the question slipped out. The stories in town, they say you killed a man. Cole's hand stopped moving. The leather creaked as he tightened his grip. I was 20, he said softly. I was working a herd in Abilene. A man. He decided he did not like the way I looked at a shop girl. He gathered 3 of his friends. They caught me in an alley. They had ropes. He stared into the fire, his eyes seeing something far away and terrible. They were going to hang me for existing. I had a knife. One of them did not go home to his mother. He looked at Lily then, challenging her to judge him. I did not start it, he said, but I finished it, and I have never apologized for staying alive. Lily looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the defensive hunch of his shoulders. She saw a boy who had been cornered in an alley, terrified and alone, fighting for his breath. She saw a reflection of her own desperation in the saloon. No, Lily said quietly. You should not apologize for surviving. Cole held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, and went back to his work. The silence that settled between them was less sharp than before. The thaw between them happened in inches. It happened the day Lily burned the bread. She had been distracted by a hawk circling outside, and the loaves had turned into black bricks. She had served them at supper, face burning with mortification, expecting him to complain or dock her pay. Cole had taken a piece of the charred bread. He had crushed it in his hand, dipped it in the stew, and eaten it without a word. He ate every bite. It was a kindness so silent she almost missed it. It happened the morning she found a mug of fresh coffee waiting on the table for her when she came out of her room. Cole was already gone, but the cup was still hot. It happened the night she noticed the tear in his best shirt, the one he had worn the night he took her. Take it off, she had said. Cole had frozen, hand on the buttons. What? The shirt, Lily said, gesturing with her needle. The shoulder is ripped. I cannot mend it while you are wearing it. He had removed the shirt, sitting by the fire in his undershirt. Lily had stood beside him to sew the tear. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin. She could smell the scent of him, soap, leather, and pine. As she stitched, her hand brushed his shoulder. The muscle beneath the cotton jumped. Lily's hands shook. She pulled the thread tight, her breath catching in her throat. She was close enough to see the texture of his skin, the dark hair on his forearms. For a moment, the air in the room felt thick, charged with a sudden, dangerous awareness. They were a man and a woman, alone in a vast emptiness. The rules they had set felt very thin. Done, she whispered, biting the thread. She stepped back quickly. Cole put the shirt back on, buttoning it with fingers that seemed less steady than usual. Thank you, he said, his voice gruff. The storm rolled in 3 days later. It was a cold, lashing rain that hammered against the roof like handfuls of gravel. Thunder walked across the plains, shaking the ground. Lily was asleep in a room when she heard the sound, a cry, a strangled, panicked shout from the main room. She grabbed her wrapper and opened the door. The fire had died down to embers, casting a red, hellish glow over the room. Cole was on his bedroll near the hearth. He was thrashing, his legs kicking out, his arms fighting invisible enemies. "No!" he shouted. "Get back! No!" It was a sound of pure terror. Lily did not think. She crossed the room and knelt beside him. "Cole," she said. "Cole, wake up!" He did not hear her. He was gasping, his head thrashing from side to side. "The rope!" he moaned. "Do not... the rope!" He was back in that alley in Abilene. He was being choked. Lily reached out and put her hand on his shoulder. "Cole, you are safe." He jerked awake with a violent start. He scrambled backward. crab walking away from her until his back hit the stone of the fireplace. His chest was heaving. His eyes were wide and wild, unseeing in the dim light. He had a knife in his hand. She hadn't even seen him draw it from under his pillow. "Cole," Lily said softly, raising her hands. "It is me. It is Lily. It was a dream." Cole blinked. His breathing was ragged, loud in the quiet room. Slowly, the wildness faded from his eyes, replaced by a crushing, profound shame. He lowered the knife. He looked at her, kneeling in her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. He looked at the knife in his hand. He turned his face away, hiding his eyes from her. "Go back to bed," he croaked. "Are you—" "Go back to bed." The order was harsh, desperate. Lily stood up. She looked at his bent back, the curve of his spine speaking of a burden too heavy to carry. She realized then that the strong, silent rancher was just as haunted as she was. He was not a monster. He was a man who woke up screaming. "Good night, Cole," she said gently. She went back to her room. She did not sleep. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The world was gray and dripping. Cole was at the table when she came out. He did not look up from his plate. "Thank you," he mumbled into his coffee, "for waking me." "Everyone has nightmares," Lily said, pouring herself a cup. She kept her tone light, casual, granting him the dignity of pretending it hadn't been important. Cole looked up then. His eyes searched hers. He saw no judgment there. The tension in his shoulders eased. Just a fraction. 30 miles away, in the smoky office of the Golden Steer, Ben Trask poured 2 fingers of whiskey for Sheriff Mallory. "She has been gone a week," Trask said, his voice low. "Mercer paid the debt," Mallory said, shifting in his chair. "Legally, Ben, there is not much we can do." "He stole her," Trask said. He swirled the amber liquid. "He came into my place, made a scene, and dragged a screaming woman out into the night. You heard the men talking. They say he forced her. They say she was begging for help." "She was," Mallory admitted. "But he put gold on the table." "Gold covers the debt," Trask said, leaning forward, his eyes glittering. "It does not cover kidnapping. It does not cover the theft of personal property." Trask was losing money. The men missed the singer. The supply train had come and gone, and the trader from St. Louis had been displeased at the lack of merchandise. Trask did not like losing money, and he hated Cole Mercer. He hated his arrogance. He hated his land. He hated his blood. "If we go out there," Mallory said nervously, "it could get ugly. Mercer is a crack shot." "We do not go out there yet," Trask said. He smiled, a slow, unpleasant stretching of his lips. "We let the town do the work. We let them talk. We remind them that a savage has a white woman locked up in his cabin. We remind the church folk. We remind the drunks." He knocked back the whiskey. "By the time the snow flies, Sheriff, half the town will be ready to ride out there and burn him out just on principle. And when they do, we will be there to pick up the pieces." Trask set the glass down. "I want her back, Mallory, and I want him dead. In that order." Winter arrived not with a whimper, but with the slam of a heavy door. The autumn gold of the prairie grass was bleached white by morning frosts that did not melt until noon, and the sky turned the color of hammered tin, hard and impenetrable. The wind, which had been a constant companion since Lily arrived, sharpened its teeth. It no longer just pushed, it cut, seeking out every gap in the chinking of the log house and every threadbare spot in a coat. The mornings were the hardest. The water in the basin was frozen solid, requiring the handle of a knife to break the crust. Lily's breath fogged in the air before her, white plumes that vanished as quickly as they formed. On a Tuesday morning that felt brittle enough to snap, Lily stood by the woodpile behind the cabin. She wore a heavy woolen shawl Cole had found in an old trunk, wrapped tight over her coat, but the cold still gnawed at her bones. She held the axe with hands that felt clumsy and stiff. She swung the axe. It struck the log with a dull thud, biting in only an inch and sending a shockwave up her arms that rattled her teeth. The wood, A piece of seasoned oak refused to split. "Damn it," she whispered, the curse feeling strange on her tongue. She wrenched the axe free and swung again. The angle was wrong. The blade glanced off the side of the wood, burying itself in the frozen dirt near her boot. Lily let out a sharp breath, her heart hammering. She had nearly taken off her own toe. She stared at the axe handle, frustration burning hot behind her eyes. She hated feeling useless. She hated that this land required a strength she did not seem to possess. A shadow fell over her. She turned to find Cole standing there. He had come from the barn, carrying 2 buckets of milk. He set them down in the snow and watched her, his expression unreadable. "You are swinging with your arms," he said. His voice was quiet, carrying easily in the thin air. "I am swinging with everything I have," Lily retorted, wiping a strand of hair from her face. "The wood is stubborn." "The wood is just wood," Cole said. He stepped closer. The heat of his body was a sudden, tangible presence in the biting cold. He reached out and took the axe from her hands. His fingers brushed hers, his warm and rough, hers cold and red. The contact lasted only a second, but Lily felt it travel up her arm like the heat from a stove. She stepped back, giving him room. "It is in the hips," Cole said. He set a fresh log on the stump. He did not look like he was preparing for a great effort. He stood loose, relaxed. Then he moved. It was a fluid motion, the axe rising and falling in one smooth arc. There was a sharp crack, and the log fell away in 2 perfect halves. "Let the weight of the head do the work," he said. "Do not fight it. Guide it." He set up another log and handed the axe back to her. Lily hesitated, then took the handle. She could still feel the warmth of his grip on the wood. She set her feet the way he had. She tried to loosen the tension in her shoulders. She swung. It wasn't perfect, but the axe bit deep, splitting the wood 3/4 of the way down. "Better," Cole said. He didn't leave immediately. He stayed and stacked the wood as she split it. They worked in a rhythm, the thwack of the axe and the clatter of the wood the only sounds in the immense silence of the plains. For the first time since she had arrived, the silence did not feel heavy. It felt shared. The days grew short, the sun retreating behind the mountains by late afternoon, plunging the ranch into a long, blue twilight. The evenings were forced upon them, trapping them inside the small radius of the firelight. In the beginning, the hours after supper had been filled with a strained, suffocating quiet. Lily would read from the few books she had found in the trunk, a water-damaged Bible, a book of poetry, and a treatise on animal husbandry, while Cole stared at the fire or worked on his gear. They moved around each other like 2 repelling magnets, careful not to touch, careful not to speak more than was necessary. But the winter wore down their defenses. The wind howling outside made the circle of light inside feel like a sanctuary, and sanctuaries demanded communion. It started with small things. "My mother used to sing that," Cole said one night, looking up from the bridle he was mending. Lily lowered her book. She hadn't realized she was humming. "It is an old hymn, Abide With Me. She sang it in Cheyenne," Cole said. "It sounded different, like the wind in the grass." "I would like to hear that," Lily said softly. Cole didn't sing it, but he nodded. The silence that followed was softer. A week later, while the snow hissed against the window panes, Lily looked up from her mending. "I used to be afraid of thunderstorms," she said. "When I was a girl in Ohio, my father would tell me it was just the angels bowling." Cole chuckled, a low, rusty sound that Lily found she liked. "My uncle told me it was the thunderbirds fighting. He said if you hid under the bed, they would think you were a mouse and eat you. You had to stand on the porch and face it." "That sounds terrifying," Lily said. "It cured me of hiding," Cole replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The stories became the bridge they walked across the darkness. They were safe topics at first: weather, horses, childhood foolishness. But as the nights deepened, the stories cut closer to the bone. One night, the fire was burning low, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Lily had been staring at the flames for a long time. The book open but unread in her lap. The weight of the past few years was pressing on her chest, heavy and suffocating. "They blamed me," she said. She didn't look at Cole. Cole stopped oiling his boots. He sat very still. "Who blamed you?" "The town, my husband's family." Lily's voice was steady, but it was a fragile steadiness, like thin ice. When I lost it." She saw Cole's hands tighten on the leather boot, his knuckles turning white. "It was a boy," she whispered. "I was 6 months along. I fell in the garden, just a stumble, but the pain started that night." She took a shuddering breath. "The doctor said it was a weakness in me. He said some fields are not meant to grow corn. My mother-in-law." She told Thomas, my husband, that I had done it on purpose. She said I was too fond of my books and my teaching, that I didn't want to be a mother. "That is a lie," Cole said. His voice was a growl. "Thomas defended me," Lily said, a tear tracing a hot path down her cheek. "But after he died?" "Oh, after he died. There was no one to stop them. Then the banker, Mr. Henderson." She squeezed her eyes shut. "He was a deacon, a pillar of the community. He cornered me in the schoolhouse. He said a widow needed comfort. When I fought him off, he told everyone I had lured him there. He said I was unnatural, that my barrenness had made me wicked." She looked at Cole then, her face wet, her expression defying him to judge her. "They cast me out. Cole, they didn't use pitchforks, but they used words. They stopped buying my eggs. They pulled their children from my school. They made me a ghost before I even left. I came west because I thought I could outrun the shame. But shame, it travels in the blood." Cole stared at her. His face was a mask of fury, but the fury was not directed at her. It was a cold, terrifying rage directed at ghosts 300 miles away. He stood up and walked to the fireplace, bracing his arm against the mantel. He stared into the flames. "It was not your fault," he said. The words were simple, but he spoke them with the weight of a verdict. "What happened to the baby? What happened with that man? None of it was your fault. Lily, they were weak men scared of a strong woman, and they tried to break you to make themselves feel big." He turned to look at her. The firelight caught the scar on his jaw. "You are not barren," he said fiercely. "And you are not wicked. You are the strongest thing I have ever seen." Lily let out a sob that she had been holding back for 3 years. It broke something loose in her chest. "I feel like I am poison," she whispered. "Everyone I love leaves or dies, and everywhere I go, ruin follows." Cole walked over to her chair. He went down on one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. He did not touch her, mindful of her rules, but he was close enough that she could smell the leather and tobacco smoke on him. "I know that feeling," he said quietly. He looked down at his hands. Hands that had killed, hands that had worked, hands that were now trembling slightly. "I was 22, Cole said, in a town in Kansas. Her name was Sarah. She was the daughter of the feed store owner. She had yellow hair, and she didn't care that my mother was Cheyenne. We used to meet by the creek." He swallowed hard. "Her brothers found out. They didn't want a half-breed touching their sister. They came for me at night, chased me out onto the plains. They had dogs, they had rifles." He looked up at Lily, his eyes dark with an ancient pain. "One of them caught up to me, Sarah's oldest brother. He had a knife. We fought in the mud. I didn't want to kill him. Lily, I just wanted to get away. But the knife, it went into him." Cole looked at his hands again as if he could still see the blood. "I ran. I have been running ever since. I built this place in the middle of nowhere because I thought if I stayed away from people, I couldn't hurt them. I am dangerous. Lily, I ruin things. I look at something beautiful, and it breaks." Lily looked at him, this rugged, terrifying man who was terrified of himself. She saw the boy who had been chased by dogs. She saw the man who had bought her debt not to own her, but because he couldn't stand to see another person destroyed by prejudice. She reached out. It was instinct, bypassing her fear. She laid her hand over his clenched fist. "You didn't break me. she said softly. You caught me. Cole stared at her hand on his. He looked like he wanted to turn his hand over and lace his fingers with hers, but he didn't. He just breathed, a long, shaky exhale, as if he had been holding his breath for 10 years. We are a pair, he murmured. 2 cracked cups. Maybe, Lily said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. But we still hold water. The peace of the cabin was a fragile thing, constantly besieged by the reality of the territory. It was a week later, on a night when the moon was hidden behind racing clouds, that the outside world came crashing back in. They were finishing supper when the sound of barking cut through the wind. Cole's dog, a scruffy mix of wolfhound and terrier that usually slept under the porch, was raising an alarm. Cole was on his feet instantly. He moved with a speed that always startled Lily, blowing out the lamp and grabbing the Winchester rifle from above the door. Stay here, he ordered. No, Lily said. She grabbed her coat. I am not staying in the dark, wondering if you are dead. Cole looked at her, saw the set of her jaw, and didn't argue. Stay behind me. Keep your head down. They went out into the freezing wind. The night was a swirling confusion of shadows. The dog was barking furiously toward the south pasture, near the fence line that bordered the open range. They saddled the horses in the dark, fingers fumbling with cold leather. They rode out, the horses' hooves muffled by the dusting of snow. As they crested the ridge overlooking the south fence, they saw it, a small fire flickering in a ravine. The dark shapes of men, 3 of them, and the glint of metal wire cutters. They were cutting the fence, preparing to drive a dozen of Cole's steers out into the open range where they could be rebranded or butchered. Drifters, Cole hissed. Or hired men. He pulled the rifle from its scabbard. Stay here, Lily. He nudged his horse forward, descending the slope. Lily watched, her heart in her throat. She saw how exposed he was. 1 man against 3 in the wide, dark world. Hey! Cole's voice boomed out, loud and authoritative. The men at the fence jumped. One of them scrambled for a shotgun leaning against a post. Touch that gun and you are dead, Cole shouted. He jacked the lever of his rifle. The clack-clack sound distinct and terrifying in the cold air. The man froze. Mercer? One of the men called out. His voice wavered. Step away from the fence, Cole ordered. He rode closer. The rifle trained on the center of the group. Drop the cutters. We was just passing through, the man lied, raising his hands. Got turned around. You get turned around with wire cutters in your hand often? Cole asked coldly. Lily urged her horse forward, unable to stay back. She rode up beside Cole. The men looked at her, surprised to see a woman in the saddle, her hair whipping in the wind, looking like a fury. That is the woman, one of the drifters muttered. The one from the saloon. Shut your mouth, Cole snarled. The menace in his voice was palpable. He shifted the aim of the rifle. For a second, Lily thought he was going to shoot. She saw the tension in his trigger finger. She saw the old violence rising up in him, the wolf answering the challenge. Cole, she said sharply. The sound of her voice seemed to snap him back. He didn't lower the rifle, but his shoulders dropped an inch. Get on your horses, Cole said to the men. Ride south. If I see you on my land again, I will not ask you to leave. I will bury you here. The men didn't wait. They scrambled onto their mounts, leaving the wire cutters in the snow, and galloped away into the darkness. Cole watched them go. The rifle still raised. He sat there for a long time, until the sound of their hoofbeats faded. Cole, Lily said again. He lowered the gun. He turned to look at her. His face was pale in the moonlight, his eyes wide and adrenaline bright. He looked terrified of what he had almost done. He whispered. I wanted to, but you didn't, Lily said. They rode back to the ranch in silence. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaking reaction. When they led the horses into the barn, the lantern light cast long, swinging shadows. The smell of hay and warm animal bodies was thick in the air. Cole began to unsaddle his horse, his movements jerky. Lily stood by the stall door. Her hands were trembling so hard she couldn't undo her coat buttons. The fear she had suppressed during the confrontation came rushing back. The violence of the world felt so close, so inevitable. "I hate this," she gasped. Cole turned. "I hate being afraid," Lily cried, her voice cracking. "I hate that men can just come and take. I hate that we have to live with guns in our hands. I'm so tired. Cole, I'm so tired of fighting." She sank down onto a hay bale, burying her face in her hands. Cole crossed the distance between them. He didn't touch her immediately. He stood before her, a solid wall against the fear. "I am here," he said. "I will not let them take anything." Lily looked up. Tears were streaming down her face. "It is not just the cattle. It is everything. It is my life. I feel like I am standing on the edge of a cliff every day." She swayed, the exhaustion overtaking her. Cole caught her. He put his hands on her shoulders to steady her. His grip was firm, warm, and grounding. Lily grabbed the lapels of his coat, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. They stood there in the dim lantern light, chests heaving, the air between them charged with the electricity of survival. They were alive. The blood was singing in their veins. Lily looked up at him. She saw the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. She saw the worry, and beneath the worry, a hunger that mirrored her own. She felt a pull in her stomach, a tightening that had nothing to do with fear. It was the old, forbidden longing, the desire to be held, to be known, to be possessed not as a thing, but as a woman. "Cole," she whispered. His hand slid from her shoulders to cup her face. His thumbs brushed away the tears on her cheeks. His touch was rough, calloused, and incredibly tender. "Lily," he breathed. His voice was wrecked. "I want to stop fighting," she whispered. "Just for a minute." "You do not have to fight me," he said. He leaned in. Lily tilted her head back. Her lips parted. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to kiss the fear away, to burn out the memory of the cold wind. Their faces were inches apart. She could feel his breath on her lips. Then panic spiked in her chest. The memory of Ben Trask, of the men in the saloon, of the whispers, of the shame. If she did this, if she gave in, would she be what they said she was? Would she lose the last piece of herself she had fought to keep? She pulled back. It was a sharp, jerky movement. Cole froze. He dropped his hands instantly, stepping back as if he had been burned. Lily stammered. "I cannot. I am sorry. I cannot." Cole's jaw tightened until the muscle jumped. He looked like a man who had been offered water in the desert and then had the cup kicked from his hand. But he nodded. "I know," he said hoarsely. "I know. Lily." He backed away toward the barn door. "I will check the horses," he said. "Go inside. Go to bed." "Cole, wait." "I am not going to be another man who takes what you are not ready to give," he said, his voice hard with the effort of restraint. "Go inside." He turned his back on her. The air between them hummed with unresolved heat, a tension so thick it felt like it could spark a fire in the straw. Lily turned and ran back to the house, her heart breaking for what she wanted and what she could not let herself have. In Iron Ridge, the winter deepened, and so did the malice. Ben Trask sat in his office, looking at the ledger. The numbers were red. "People are talking," Sheriff Mallory said, warming his hands by the stove. "They say Mercer has her working like a slave. They say she tries to run and he drags her back." "Is that what they say?" Trask asked, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Or is that what you told the Smith boys to say? Does it matter?" Mallory shrugged. "The preacher mentioned it in his sermon on Sunday. Said it was a stain on the town's conscience to let a Christian woman be held by a man like that." "Good," Trask said. "Let them simmer. When the weather breaks, we will not need hired guns. We will have a posse of righteous citizens ready to ride out there and rescue her." "And Mercer?" "Mercer resists," Trask said. "And when a man resists the law, sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes he gets shot. The blizzard hit 2 days after the raid. It didn't start with snow. It started with a silence so profound it hurt the ears. The wind died. The birds vanished. The sky turned a sickly, bruised yellow. Then the wind returned, not as a gust, but as a wall. It hit the cabin with a force that shook the logs in their mortar. The snow came horizontally, driven by a gale that screamed like a dying animal. Within an hour, the world outside was gone, replaced by a swirling white void. "We cannot go out," Cole shouted over the roar of the wind. He was shoving rags into the gap under the door. "The line to the barn. I tied a rope, but we only go if we have to." They were trapped. The cabin, once a place of uncomfortable proximity, became a capsule of survival. The cold pressed in from all sides, freezing the water in the bucket even near the fire. For 3 days, the storm raged. There was no escaping each other. They moved in a choreographed dance around the small room. Cole kept the fire fed, his face grim as he counted their wood supply. Lily cooked what little food they had: dried beans, salt pork, coffee. The awkwardness of the barn incident hung between them, but the storm forced it into the background. Survival took precedence. They learned each other's rhythms. Lily learned that Cole hummed when he was anxious. Cole learned that Lily rubbed her left wrist, the one Trask had bruised, when she was thinking. On the second night, the temperature dropped so low the nails in the walls popped with loud bangs like gunshots. "We have to bring the calves in," Cole said, looking at the window, which was completely blocked by snow. "The barn is too cold. They will freeze." They fought their way to the barn along the guide rope, the wind trying to tear them from the earth. They found the 2 youngest calves shivering violently, their mothers unable to keep them warm. They carried the calves into the cabin. It was absurd. A kitchen turned into a stable. But it was necessary. They laid blankets on the floor near the fire for the animals. That night, they slept in shifts to keep the fire going. When it was Cole's turn to sleep, he refused to take the bed, insisting Lily keep it. He curled up on the rug near the fire, one hand resting on the flank of a sleeping calf. Lily watched him from the bed. In the firelight, stripped of his heavy coat, he looked younger. He looked vulnerable. She got up, taking her heavy quilt. She walked over to him. Cole opened his eyes instantly, his hand going to the knife at his belt. "It is me," she whispered. She knelt and spread the quilt over him. "You will freeze," she said. "Keep it," Cole rasped. "We have to share it," Lily said. It was a practical statement, born of the deadly cold, but it felt like a confession. She lay down on the rug beside him, pulling the quilt over both of them. She kept her back to him, leaving a few inches of space between their bodies. She felt him stiffen. She felt the heat radiating from him. "Lily," he whispered. It was a warning. It was a plea. "Just for warmth." "Cole," she said, her voice trembling. "Just to survive the night?" He didn't move away. Slowly, hesitantly, he relaxed. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing trying to get in. But inside, under the heavy quilt, surrounded by the smell of wood smoke and hay, they were warm. They were together. And as sleep finally took them, Lily felt Cole's hand move, just an inch, until his knuckles were resting against the small of her back, an anchor in the storm. The blizzard broke on the 4th morning, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like the earth itself had stopped breathing. The sun rose over a world that had been erased and rewritten in blinding white. The familiar contours of the ranch were gone, smoothed over by drifts that reached the eaves of the cabin. The fences were buried, their posts merely suggestions in the snow, and the sky was a hard, polished blue that offered light but no warmth. Cole Mercer stood on the porch, squinting against the glare. He had been out since first light, digging a path to the barn, his breath plumed in the air, thick and white. When he came back inside, his face was grim, the lines around his mouth etched deep with worry. "The fences are down," he said, stomping snow from his boots. "The drift on the south ridge must be 10 feet deep, and the herd is scattered." Lily looked up from the stove where she was melting snow for water. The cabin felt different now, smaller, more intimate after their days of confinement. The smell of him, wood smoke, wool, and man, was woven into the air she breathed. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad enough," Cole replied, reaching for his heavy sheepskin coat. "I have to ride out. If the wire is down, the cattle will drift with the wind. They could be miles away by now, or frozen standing up." He didn't say the other thing that was on his mind, but Lily heard it in the heavy thud of his gun belt as he buckled it around his hips. Wolves. And men who acted like wolves. "I am coming with you," Lily said. Cole paused, his hands on his gloves. He looked at her, ready to argue. "It is 10 degrees below zero. Lily, the snow is belly deep on the horses." "And you cannot herd stray cattle and fix fence alone," Lily said, grabbing her own coat. "I am not staying here to pace the floor and wonder if you are dead in a drift. I am coming." She set her jaw in a way that he had come to recognize. It was the look she wore when she chopped wood. The look she wore when she refused to let the fire die. It was a look that said she was done being fragile. Cole studied her for a moment, a flicker of admiration warring with his protective instinct. He nodded once. "Bundle up," he said. "If you lose a toe to the frost, do not blame me." The ride was a brutal education in the hostility of the high plains. The world was a blinding sheet of white that seared the eyes. The horses struggled, lunging through drifts that swallowed their legs, their breath coming in heavy, steam engine chugs. Lily followed in Cole's wake, her scarf wrapped around her face until only her eyes were visible. The cold was a physical weight, pressing against her chest, searching for any gap in her clothing. Her fingers inside her mittens ached, then burned, then went dangerously numb. She forced herself to wiggle them, terrified of the frostbite stories Cole had told her. They rode for hours, checking the draws and coulees where cattle might have sought shelter. They found small groups of steers huddled together, their backs coated in ice, alive but exhausted. Cole drove them toward the lower pastures, shouting commands that were snatched away by the wind. It was past noon when they reached the eastern ravine, a jagged scar in the earth that usually offered good shelter. Cole pulled his horse up short. He raised a hand, signaling Lily to stop. He dismounted, sinking to his knees in the snow. He walked toward a patch of trampled ground near a stand of cottonwoods. Lily rode closer, her heart beating a nervous rhythm against her ribs. "What is it?" "Tracks," Cole said. His voice was flat, dangerous. He brushed snow away from a set of prints. They were not the wandering, aimless tracks of lost cattle. They were driven, and overlaying the hoof prints of the steers were other prints. Shod horses. "Someone drove them out," Cole said, standing up. He looked toward the southeast, toward town. 20 head, maybe 30. They cut them out during the storm and drove them into the ravine to hide their tracks until the snow stopped. "Rustlers?" Lily asked, though the word felt too small. "Ben Trask," Cole corrected. "He knows I am leveraged for the winter. If I lose this herd, I cannot pay the note on the land come spring. He is not just trying to steal cows. Lily, he is trying to bleed me dry." He swung back into the saddle, his movements sharp with anger. "The tracks are fresh enough. They moved them out this morning when the sun broke." "Are we going after them?" Lily asked, looking at the grim set of his jaw. "No," Cole said, turning his horse. "We are outnumbered, and we are tired. We go back. I will round up what is left and move them closer to the house. Tonight, I will sit up with the rifle." He looked at her, his eyes dark. "I am sorry. Lily, it seems peace is not something we are allowed to have." They turned back toward the ranch, the sun beginning its long, sliding descent toward the mountains. The shadows on the snow turned long and blue, stretching out like grasping fingers. They were crossing a ridge about 2 miles from the cabin when the crack of a rifle shattered the afternoon silence. It was a sharp, dry sound, like a branch snapping, followed instantly by the zing of lead passing through the air inches from Lily's head. "Get down!" Cole roared. He spurred his horse, putting himself between Lily and the ridgeline to the east. Another shot rang out, kicking up a spray of snow near his horse's hooves. "Ride!" Cole shouted. slapping the rump of Lily's mare. "For the ravine! Go!" Lily's horse bolted, panicked by the noise and the sudden movement. She clung to the saddle horn. Her body pitched forward. She heard Cole's horse thundering behind her, heard him shouting to draw the fire. A third shot echoed, louder this time. She heard a sickening, meaty thud, followed by a grunt of pain from behind her. Lily hauled on the reins, skidding her horse to a halt in the shelter of a shallow wash. She turned, her heart in her throat. Cole was still in the saddle, but he was slumped forward, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side. Blood, bright and shocking red, was already soaking the sleeve of his sheepskin coat. "Cole!" she screamed. He slid from the horse, his boots hitting the snow with a heavy crunch. He stumbled, falling to one knee. His face was gray, drained of blood. In an instant, "Stay down," he gasped, fumbling for the pistol at his hip with his good hand. "There are two of them, by the rocks." Lily looked up at the ridge. She saw the dark shapes of men moving against the skyline, repositioning for a better shot. They were pinned down. Cole was hit, and if those men came over the ridge, they would kill him. Fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over her. But beneath the fear was something else, a white-hot rage. Ben Trask. It was always Ben Trask. He wanted to sell her. He wanted to starve them. Now he wanted to kill the only man who had ever treated her with dignity. "No," she whispered. She saw Cole's rifle scabbard on his saddle. The horse was dancing nervously a few feet away. Lily didn't think. She moved. She scrambled through the snow, grabbing the reins of Cole's horse. She yanked the Winchester from the leather scabbard. It was heavy, heavier than the axe, heavier than anything she had ever held. "Lily, no!" Cole shouted, his voice weak. "Get back!" She didn't listen. She braced the rifle against the side of the wash, resting the barrel on a rock. She didn't know how to aim for a man. She didn't want to kill, but she knew how to make noise. She levered around into the chamber, the mechanical clack-clack sounding loud in her ears. She pointed the barrel toward the rocks where the men were hiding and pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder like a mule kick. The report was deafening. The bullet went high, singing off the rocks, but it had the desired effect. "Damn it, she is armed!" a voice shouted from the ridge. Lily gritted her teeth against the pain in her shoulder and worked the lever again. She fired again and again. She pumped 3 shots into the air as fast as she could, creating a wall of sound and fury. "Pull back!" the voice on the ridge yelled. "It is not worth it." She heard the sound of retreating hoofbeats, fading away into the distance. Lily slumped against the snowy bank, the rifle slipping from her numb fingers. Her ears were ringing. Her shoulder throbbed. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Lily!" The voice was faint. She turned. Cole was lying in the snow, his eyes half closed. The stain on his coat had spread, turning the wool dark and heavy. She scrambled over to him, falling to her knees. "I am here. They are gone." You shot at them," Cole whispered, a look of disbelief and wonder in his eyes. "I shot at the sky," she said, her voice trembling. "But they ran." She grabbed his good arm. "We have to get you home. Can you stand?" "I do not know," Cole admitted. "You have to," Lily said fiercely. "I cannot lift you. Cole, you have to stand." The next hour was a blur of agony. Lily practically dragged him to his horse. She had to bully him, shout at him, and shove him to get him into the saddle. He was dead weight, his consciousness flickering in and out. She tied his hands to the saddle horn so he wouldn't fall. She mounted her own horse and grabbed his reins, leading them back across the white, silent hell of the plains. Every step the horse took seemed to jar Cole, drawing a groan from his lips that tore at Lily's heart. The wind picked up again, blowing snow over their tracks, as if trying to erase the evidence of their existence. By the time the cabin came into view, the sun was gone. The world was blue and gray. Getting him off the horse and into the house was harder than the ride. They collapsed together through the door, Lily taking his weight as he stumbled. They fell onto the rug before the fire, Cole landing heavily, Lily sprawling beside him. The warmth of the room hit them, The calves, still in their corner, lowed softly. Lily scrambled up. She locked the door. She added wood to the fire until it roared. Then she turned to Cole. He was unconscious. His skin was clammy and pale, the scar on his jaw standing out like a brand. "Do not die," she commanded, her voice breaking. "Do not you dare die on me, Cole Mercer." She grabbed her sewing scissors. With trembling hands, she cut away the heavy sheepskin coat, then the flannel shirt beneath. The fabric was stuck to the wound with drying blood, and she had to peel it away. Apologizing with every inch, the bullet had passed through the fleshy part of his upper shoulder. It had missed the bone, she thought, and it had gone clean through. But the hole was ugly, puckered and oozing. She needed water. She needed whiskey. She needed to be steady. She fetched the basin and the bottle of cheap rye Cole kept in the cupboard. She tore up one of her petticoats for bandages. When she poured the whiskey onto the wound, Cole's back arched off the floor, a guttural cry tearing from his throat. His eyes flew open, blind with pain. I am sorry, Lily wept, holding him down with all her strength. "I have to clean it." She worked through the night, washing the wound, packing it, binding it tight. She dragged him onto the mattress she had pulled from her room to the fireside. She covered him with every blanket they owned. Then she sat in the rocking chair, the rifle across her lap, and watched his chest rise and fall. The silence of the plains pressed against the walls, heavy and suffocating. They were two specks of life in a vast ocean of cold, and death was waiting just outside the door. The fever came with the darkness. For 3 days, Cole burned. His body, so strong and capable, was reduced to a shivering, thrashing vessel of heat. Lily did not sleep. She dozed in the chair, waking at every sound he made. She wiped his brow with cool rags. She dripped water between his cracked lips. She held his hand when he reached out into the empty air, grasping for ghosts. It was in the fever that she met the man beneath the silence. He did not rave about cattle or fences. He raved about things that broke her heart. "I did not mean to," he muttered one night, thrashing against the blankets. "The knife, it just slipped. I am sorry. Tell his mother I am sorry." He was apologizing to the man he had killed years ago. The guilt was still there, fresh and bleeding. Another time, he grabbed Lily's wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Do not let them take her," he pleaded, his eyes wide and unseeing. "They will hurt her. She is made of glass. Do not let them break her." "Who? Cole?" Lily whispered, stroking his hair back from his damp forehead. "Who are you saving?" "Lily," he breathed. "My Lily." The name hung in the air. My Lily. He didn't say it like a possession. He said it like a prayer. He said it like she was something precious, something holy that he was unworthy to touch but desperate to protect. Lily sat back, her hand covering her mouth. Tears pricked her eyes. He saw her. He didn't see a fallen woman. He didn't see a debt. He saw her. She looked at his face, softened by the illness. She saw the boy who had been chased by dogs. She saw the loneliness that matched her own. "I am here," she whispered to him. "I am not going anywhere." The fever broke on the 4th night. It happened quietly. One moment he was tossing and turning, his skin burning to the touch. The next, he fell into a deep, still sleep, and sweat broke across his forehead, cooling him. Lily, exhausted beyond measure, laid her head on the edge of the mattress, near his arm. Her hand found his, her fingers curling loosely around his rough palm. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. She woke to the feeling of a thumb brushing the back of her hand. She lifted her head. The lamp was burning low, casting a golden circle of light over the bed. Cole was watching her. His eyes were clear, dark, tired, but clear. "You are alive," Lily breathed. A sob of relief escaped her throat. "You stayed," Cole rasped. His voice was a wreck, dry as dust. "Where else would I go?" Lily asked, wiping her eyes. She reached for the cup of water and held it to his lips. He drank greedily, some of the water escaping to run down his chin. Lily wiped it away with her thumb without thinking. Cole looked at her. He looked at the dark circles under her eyes, the exhaustion in her posture. "You should not have to do this," he whispered. "Nurse a half-breed gunman in a shack." "Stop it," Lily said firmly. "You deserve better." Cole said. He turned his head away, staring at the ceiling. "You deserve a house with windows that do not rattle. You deserve a man who can buy you silk, not one who gets shot and bleeds on your floor. I am just a hard life. Lily, that is all I have to give." Lily looked at him. She thought of the man in the saloon who had stood up for her when no one else would. She thought of the man who had taught her to chop wood, who had eaten her burnt bread, who had covered her with a quilt to keep her warm. She thought of the way he had said her name in his fever. "I had a soft life once," Lily said quietly. "I had a house with windows. I had a husband who was respectable. And when the world turned on me, none of that saved me. Respectability is just a thin coat of paint. Cole, it peels off in the rain." She took his hand in both of hers. She squeezed it, needing him to feel her presence. "I do not want silk," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to be safe. I want to be seen. You see me, Cole? You are the only one who ever really has—" Cole turned his head back to her. His gaze searched her face, looking for the lie, looking for the pity. "I want you," Lily whispered. The confession terrified her, but it felt right. It felt true. "I have wanted you for a long time, but I was afraid. I was afraid that if I gave in, I would just be property again, something taken." She took a deep breath. "I do not want to be taken. Cole, I want to choose." She leaned closer. "And I choose you." Cole stared at her. His chest rose and fell rapidly. "Lily, can I kiss you?" she asked. Cole didn't answer with words. He lifted his good hand, his fingers trembling, and cupped the back of her neck. He pulled her down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't pull away. Their lips met. It was not the kiss of a romance novel. It tasted of salt and sickness and whiskey. But it was real. It was warm. It was an opening of doors that had been bolted shut for years. Cole kissed her with a desperate tenderness, as if he were holding a butterfly. Lily kissed him back with a fierce hunger, pouring all her fear and all her hope into the contact. They broke apart, breathless. Lily's forehead rested against his. She was crying again, silent tears that dripped onto his cheek. "I thought I would never have this again," she whispered. "You have me," Cole vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "For as long as I draw breath, Lily, you have me." They stayed like that for a long time. The storm of the world locked outside, the quiet of the room wrapping around them like a shield. They did not rush. In the days that followed, as Cole's strength returned, they lived in a new, tentative intimacy. There were no grand declarations, only small touches, a hand on a shoulder, a lingering look across the table. Cole kept his promise. He did not press her. He slept on the pallet by the fire even after he was well enough to move, letting her keep the bed. "I will wait," he told her one night, watching her brush her hair by the firelight. "I would rather wait 100 years than see regret in your eyes." The snow began to melt. It turned the world into a slush of gray mud. The streams swelled, roaring with runoff. The air turned softer, smelling of wet earth and waking grass. Spring was coming, and with spring, the road to town opened. A rider came through a week later. It was Old Man Miller, a neighbor from 20 miles north who stopped to water his horse. He looked at Cole's bandaged shoulder, then at Lily, who was serving coffee on the porch. "You folks best be careful," Miller said, looking uncomfortable. "There is talk in Iron Ridge." "What kind of talk?" Cole asked, leaning against the railing. "Ben Trask," Miller said. "He is telling everyone you stole those cattle that went missing in the storm. Says he has witnesses who saw your brand on them, and—" He glanced at Lily. "He says you stole the woman, too. Says you are holding her against her will. Sheriff is talking about a warrant." Cole's face hardened into stone. "That is a lie." Truth does not matter much when folks are angry and looking for a hanging, Miller said. He tipped his hat to Lily. I would keep your heads down, or keep riding west. Miller rode off, leaving a cloud of dread in his wake. Cole turned to Lily. We could go, he said. Pack the wagon, leave the herd, head for Montana, start over. Lily looked at the muddy yard. She looked at the barn they had repaired. She looked at the fields where the green shoots of grass were pushing through the snow. She thought about running. She had run from Ohio. She had run from her memories. If they ran now, Trask won. If they ran, they were admitting guilt. They would be fugitives, looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. She felt a spark in her chest. It was the same spark that had made her pick up the rifle. No, Lily said. Cole looked at her, surprised. I am done running, Lily said. Her voice gained strength. I am done letting men like Ben Trask write my story. If we run, we are what they say we are. Thieves, whores. She turned to Cole, her eyes blazing. We go back, she said. We go to Iron Ridge. We stand in front of that town, and we tell them the truth. We face them. Cole hesitated. He looked at his shoulder, then at the gun on his hip. It is dangerous, Lily. They might arrest me. They might shoot me. Then we fight, Lily said. But we fight standing up. I will not hide in this cabin waiting for them to come burn us out. Cole looked at her, this woman who had arrived broken and freezing, now standing tall, fierce as a lioness. He realized that he wasn't protecting her anymore. She was standing beside him. He nodded slowly. A grim smile touched his lips. All right, Cole said. When the road's clear, we go back. The spring of 1878 came to the high plains like a fever breaking. It was a season of violence and beauty, arriving in fits and starts. One day the wind would blow warm from the south, smelling of wet earth and sage, turning the snow into roaring rivers of slush that choked the gullies. The next, a hard frost would snap the necks of the early crocuses, a reminder that winter still held the land by the throat. The ranch was a muddy island in a sea of new grass. The creek that bordered the property, usually a trickling ribbon, was now a swollen, brown torrent that tore at its banks. Inside the cabin, the air felt different too. The desperate, huddled survival of the blizzard had given way to a nervous anticipation. They were no longer fighting the elements. They were preparing to fight the world. Lily spent her evenings not with a book, but in front of the small, cracked mirror above the washstand. She rehearsed. He was going to sell me, she whispered to her reflection, her hands gripping the edge of the basin. It was not a debt. It was a sale. She watched her own face. It was thinner than it had been a year ago, the bones sharper, but the eyes were different. The fear that had lived there for so long had hardened into something like steel. I am not a whore, she said, testing the word that she knew the town used for her. And I am not a victim. I am a witness. Cole watched her from the table where he was cleaning his rifle. He did not interrupt her. He knew she was building armor, layer by layer, for the battle to come. He had his own preparations. He rode out to the Miller place 2 days after the roads cleared. John Miller was a hard man, a widower who raised sheep and cattle and had no patience for the corruption that rotted Iron Ridge from the inside out. They stood by Miller's fence, 2 men in muddy coats, speaking in low tones. I heard Trask talking to the sheriff back in November, Miller admitted, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. About the Chicago arrangement, I thought it was cattle, but when you took the girl, well, it made sense. Will you say that in front of a judge? Cole asked. Miller looked at the distant mountains. Trask holds the note on my feed bill. Cole, if I speak against him, he calls it in. If you do not speak, Cole said quietly, then there is no law in this valley. Just Ben Trask's wallet. Miller grimaced. He looked at Cole, then at the scar on his jaw. You are asking a lot. Mercer, I am asking for the truth, Cole said. Miller sighed, kicking a clod of mud. I will be there. I cannot promise I will be loud. But I will not lie if asked. It was a start. A fragile network of allies was forming, men and women who were tired of the fear, but terrified to break it. The day they rode into Iron Ridge, the sky was a brilliant, hard blue, and the wind was stripping the last of the dead leaves from the cottonwoods. They rode side by side. Lily wore her best dress, a simple gray wool that she had mended and brushed until it looked respectable. She sat tall in the saddle, her spine rigid. Cole rode his black gelding, his face a mask of stone, his rifle scabbard empty but his pistol prominent on his hip. As they passed the first houses, the town seemed to hold its breath. A woman sweeping her porch stopped and stared, her broom forgotten. Two men loading a wagon paused, crates in their hands, watching with open hostility. The whispers started like the hiss of dry grass catching fire. "That is her?" a voice floated from a doorway. "The one he keeps? Look at him," another sneered. "Riding in here like he owns the place, after what he did." Lily felt the gazes like physical touches, dirty, invasive hands crawling over her skin. She wanted to shrink. She wanted to turn her horse and gallop back to the safety of the ranch, but she felt Cole's presence beside her, solid and unyielding as a cliff face. "Eyes front," she told herself. "Do not let them see you bleed." They tied their horses at the rail in front of the Golden Steer. The saloon looked shabbier in the daylight, its paint peeling, the sign creaking in the wind. To Lily, it looked like the mouth of a beast that had swallowed her whole once before. Cole offered her his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, anchoring her to the earth. They walked through the bat-wing doors. The saloon was quiet, the midday lull. A few drunks dozed at the tables. Ben Trask stood behind the bar, polishing a glass. Sheriff Mallory was sitting near the stove, nursing a coffee. When they entered, the silence that fell was instant and absolute. Trask looked up, his eyes narrowed, sinking into the doughy flesh of his face. He set the glass down slowly. "Well," Trask said, his voice oily and loud. "Look who decided to come back. Run out of food up there in your love nest. Mercer?" Cole did not rise to the bait. He walked to the center of the room, Lily beside him. He stopped 10 feet from the bar. "We are here to settle things." "Trask," Cole said. "Settle." Trask laughed. "The only thing you are settling is your tab, and the price of the cattle you stole." "I stole nothing," Cole said. "And I am not here to pay a tab," Lily said. Her voice shook, just a little, but it carried. She stepped forward, separating herself slightly from Cole. She stood on the very floorboards where she used to sing for pennies. "I am here to tell the truth," she said. Trask sneered. "The truth? From a whore who ran off with a half-breed?" The word hung in the air, ugly and violent. "I am not a whore," Lily said, her voice rising. "And I did not run off. You tried to sell me, Ben Trask. You told me in your office that I was going to a brothel in St. Louis to pay my debt. You told me I had no choice." She turned to Sheriff Mallory. The lawman shifted in his chair, refusing to meet her eyes. "And you knew," she accused him. "You signed the transfer order. You were going to let him ship me like cattle." "Now see here," Mallory blustered, standing up. "That is slander, Mrs. Hart. You are distraught. You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying," Lily said. "Cole Mercer did not kidnap me. He bought my debt to save me from you." The room had begun to fill. Men from the street, sensing a confrontation, had drifted in. They stood along the walls, watching, listening. Trask slammed his hand on the bar. "He bought you because he wanted to use you. Look at what he did. Dragged you out of here screaming. Does that look like a rescue?" "It looked like what you understand." Cole cut in. His voice was cold. "I spoke your language. Trask, brute force and money. Because it is the only language you respect." "You are disturbing the peace," Mallory said, his hand resting on his gun. "I am going to have to ask you to surrender your weapon. Mercer, you are under arrest." It was a trap. If Cole gave up his gun, they would lock him in a cell, and Lily would be defenseless. Cole didn't move. I am not surrendering anything until a judge hears this." "We do not have a judge," Mallory said. Stepping forward, "Actually," a voice came from the back of the room. "You do." A tall, gray-haired man in a dusty traveling coat stepped out of the shadows. It was Judge Henry Caldwell, a circuit rider who covered the territory from Bismarck to the Badlands. He had arrived on the morning stage, unnoticed in the drama. "I am passing through on my way to Deadwood," Caldwell said. He looked from Trask to Cole, his eyes shrewd and tired. "But it seems I have stumbled into a court of public opinion. If there are accusations of human trafficking and kidnapping, Sheriff, I suggest we convene a hearing immediately." Trask paled. A circuit judge was not part of the plan. The hearing was held an hour later in the back room of the town hall, a cramped, stuffy space that smelled of dry rot and old paper. It was not a courtroom. There was no gavel, no bailiff. Just a table for the judge and rows of mismatched chairs filled with curious, hostile townsfolk. Trask and Mallory sat on one side, looking smug. They had the town on their side. They had the rumors. Cole and Lily sat on the other. They were alone, save for old Miller, who sat in the back row, hat in his hands. Judge Caldwell looked over his spectacles. "Mrs. Hart," he said, "you may speak." Lily stood. Her hands were trembling, so she clasped them together in front of her. She looked at the faces in the room, the women who had shunned her, the men who had leered at her. "My name is Lily Hart," she began. "I was a teacher in Ohio. I was a wife." She told them everything. She didn't just speak of the saloon. She spoke of the slow, grinding destruction of her life. She spoke of the husband who died, the baby she lost, the lies that had driven her west. She spoke of the hunger that had forced her to sing, and the fear that had lived in her throat every night. "Mr. Trask told me I was livestock," she said, her voice ringing in the small room. "He said I had no value but my body. He was going to sell me for $50. She looked directly at Trask. "I am not livestock," she said. "I am a human being. And what Mr. Mercer did, it was ugly. It was terrifying. But he did it because no one else in this town, not the sheriff, not the church elders, not one of you, would lift a finger to stop a woman from being sold." Silence stretched in the room. Some of the women looked down at their laps, ashamed. The men shifted uncomfortably. Then Cole stood. He looked huge in the small room, a dark presence that made the air feel thin. "I humiliated her," Cole admitted. He looked at Lily, his expression open and pained. "I called her things no woman should be called. I grabbed her. I dragged her. I made you all think I was a monster." He turned to the judge. "I did it because if I had asked politely, Trask would have laughed. If I had gone to the sheriff, he would have stalled until she was on that train. I had to buy her to save her, and I hated every second of it." "He is lying," Trask shouted, jumping up. "He is a violent man, a killer. He wants her for himself." "Sit down, Mr. Trask," the judge snapped. The judge looked weary. He looked at the ledger Trask had produced, a book that showed debts, but no mention of a sale. It was word against word. "Without a contract," the judge murmured. "It is difficult to prove intent to sell." Trask grinned. He was winning. Then, a movement at the back of the room caught the light. A young woman stood up. She was a barmaid at the Golden Steer, a girl of no more than 19 with hair dyed a brassy red. Her name was Sarah. "Your Honor?" she squeaked. "Speak up, girl," the judge said. Sarah swallowed hard. She looked at Trask, who was glaring at her with lethal intent. She shook, but she didn't sit down. "Mr. Trask, he told me the same thing last month. He said I owed too much for my room. He said there was a man in Chicago who liked redheads." A murmur rippled through the room. "He said if I didn't work harder, he'd ship me off." Sarah whispered, "Just like Lily." Another woman, a laundress who washed the saloon linens, spoke from her seat. "I heard him too, arguing with the sheriff about the freight fee for the girls." The wall of silence cracked. It didn't shatter, but it cracked. The town, for all its prejudice, had lines it did not like to see crossed. Selling women to city brothels was one of them. Trask looked around, his face reddening. "These are lies. Whores sticking together." "That is enough." Judge Caldwell slammed his hand on the table. He looked at Trask with cold disgust. "Mr. Trask, the testimony of Mrs. Hart, corroborated by these witnesses, paints a very disturbing picture. While I cannot convict you of a crime without more evidence, I can issue a temporary injunction against your business pending a federal investigation into your labor practices." He turned to Cole. "Mr. Mercer, your methods were unorthodox and illegal. You cannot buy a person, debt or no. However, given the mitigating circumstances, I'm inclined to view your actions as defense of a third party." He leaned back. Case suspended. "Trask, you are fined $200 for operating a disorderly house. Sheriff, I will be writing to the governor about your record-keeping." It was not a victory. It was a reprieve, but it was more than they had hoped for. They walked out of the town hall into the late afternoon sun. The crowd parted for them, but the hostility was still there, mixed now with confusion. Ben Trask stood on the steps, his eyes burning with hate. "This is not over. Mercer," Trask hissed as they passed. "You watch your back." "You watch yours," Cole said. They couldn't ride back to the ranch. Night was falling, and the horses were tired. Cole had a small holding pen and a lean-to barn on the edge of town, where he kept cattle before shipping them. They decided to stay there and ride out at first light. It was a mistake. The tension in town had not dissipated. It had curdled. Trask's hired hands were drinking in the alleyways, muttering about the fine, about the uppity half-breed and his lying woman. Cole and Lily were in the small tack room of the barn, eating a cold supper of bread and cheese. The air was thick with the smell of dry hay and nervous energy. "We did it," Lily whispered. She felt lightheaded, drained. "We stood up. We poked a bear," Cole said grimly. He was checking his pistol. "Do not sleep too soundly. Lily." He was right. It started at midnight. Lily woke to the smell of smoke, not the comfortable smell of a wood stove, but the acrid, choking stench of burning oil and dry timber. "Cole!" she screamed. Cole was already up. "Fire!" They burst out of the tack room. The front of the barn was a wall of orange flame. Someone had doused the entrance with kerosene and thrown a torch. The fire was climbing the walls with terrifying speed, roaring like a waterfall. Inside the barn, 10 of Cole's best steers were screaming, trapped in their pens. "The animals!" Cole shouted. He grabbed a blanket and dipped it in the water trough, throwing it over his head. "Get out! Lily! Run to the river!" "No!" Lily yelled. Cole didn't argue. He ran into the smoke, toward the pens. Lily ran out the back door. The night sky was lit up with a hellish glow. The wind was whipping the sparks high into the air, carrying them toward the nearby houses, the wooden shacks of the miners and the laborers. "Fire!" Lily screamed, running toward the nearest house. "Fire! Help!" Doors opened. People stumbled out in their nightshirts. They saw the barn engulfed, the sparks raining down on their own roofs. Panic set in. "It will take the whole row," a man shouted. Lily grabbed a bucket from a bewildered woman's porch. "The river," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Form a line. Pass the buckets. If we do not stop it here, the whole town burns." She didn't look like a fallen woman then. She looked like a general. She ran to the riverbank, filling the bucket, hauling it up the slope. "Move!" she yelled at the men who were standing and staring. "Move or burn!" Shamed into action, or perhaps just terrified. They moved. A bucket brigade formed. Men, women, even children joined the line. Water splashed and sloshed as buckets were passed hand to hand. Lily stood at the front, closest to the heat. Her face was blackened with soot, her dress soaked. She threw water on the roof of the nearest house, steaming and hissing as the sparks landed. Inside the burning barn, Cole was fighting his own battle. The heat was blistering. He couldn't see through the smoke. He found the gate to the pen by feel, the metal searing his hands. He kicked the latch open. "Yeah, get out!" He slapped the rumps of the terrified steers. They stampeded past him, knocking him against the burning wall. He smelled his own hair singing. He stumbled out the back door, coughing violently, just as the roof of the barn groaned and collapsed inward in a fountain of sparks. He fell to his knees in the dirt, gasping for air. He looked up. He saw the bucket line. He saw Lily, a silhouette against the inferno, directing the townspeople. She was saving the homes of the people who had spat on her. He forced himself up. He grabbed a shovel. He joined the line, throwing dirt on the embers that drifted too close to the houses. They fought the fire for 3 hours. They fought until their arms were lead and their lungs were raw. When the sun rose, the barn was a pile of smoldering black ash. But the houses stood. The town was safe. The bucket line dissolved. People stood in the gray light, covered in soot, looking at each other. They looked at Lily, who was sitting on an overturned crate, her hands blistered, her face streaked with grime and sweat. She looked wrecked. She looked magnificent. Cole walked over to her. He was limping, and his bandaged shoulder was bleeding again, seeping through his shirt. He put a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, her eyes bright in her dark face. "We saved them," she whispered. A woman walked up to them. It was Mrs. Gable, the wife of the general store owner, a woman who had famously crossed the street to avoid Lily for 6 months. Mrs. Gable held a tin dipper of water. She hesitated, then held it out to Lily. "Drink," the woman said. Her voice was stiff, but not unkind. "You swallowed a lot of smoke." Lily took the dipper. "Thank you, Mrs." Gable looked at the charred remains of the barn, then at Cole. "My husband has some lumber," she said. "He might be willing to offer a discount." "Seeing as you saved our roof," it wasn't an apology. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the ice. Other people nodded. A man tipped his hat to Cole. They were still the rancher and the singer. They were still a scandal, but they were also the ones who had stood between the town and the fire. Cole looked at Lily. He saw the pride in her weary posture. "Let us go home," he said. "Yes," Lily said. "Let us go home." They mounted their horses, the animals skittish from the smell of smoke. As they rode out of town, they didn't look back, but this time, no one jeered. The town watched them go in silence, a silence that held a grudging, newfound respect. The judgment of the territory court did not come down like a hammer from God. It came down like the weary sigh of a man who had seen too much dust and too little justice. Judge Caldwell sat behind the scarred oak table in the makeshift courtroom, wiping his spectacles with a handkerchief that had gone gray with travel. The room was stifling, packed with bodies that smelled of sweat, wool, and anticipation. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes, a constant reminder that the law of man was a fragile thing compared to the law of the prairie. "Ben Trask," the judge said, his voice scratching like dry leaves. "This court finds your business practices to be irregular." Trask stood, his hat in his hands, his face a mask of simmering resentment. He did not look like a man who was afraid. He looked like a man who was inconvenienced. "You are fined $500 for the operation of a disorderly house and for the solicitation of illicit contracts," the judge continued. "Furthermore, the Golden Steer is ordered to close its doors for a period of 30 days, pending a full inquiry by the federal marshal's office into allegations of human trafficking." A murmur rippled through the room. $500 was a staggering sum, enough to buy a small herd of cattle. Closing the saloon for a month was a death sentence for Trask's immediate cash flow. The judge turned his gaze to Sheriff Mallory. The lawman shrank in his seat, his badge catching a dull glint of light. "Sheriff," Caldwell said, his tone dropping an octave, "I am stripping you of your authority effective immediately. A temporary marshal will be appointed until an election can be held. You are to remain in town, Mr. Mallory. Do not think about taking a trip. You will be watched." It was not a hanging. It was not a prison sentence. No one had said the words kidnapping or assault. No one had pointed a finger at Trask and called him a slaver. To the casual observer, it was a bureaucratic slap on the wrist. But to Lily Hart, sitting with her back straight and her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. It was an earthquake. She looked at Trask. For the first time since she had arrived in Iron Ridge, she saw fear in his eyes. He had lost his shield, he had lost his prophet, and he had lost his power to terrify her. The judge gathered his papers. "Court is adjourned." The room exhaled. Lily stood up. Cole rose beside her, his presence a warm, solid wall against the press of the crowd. He did not look at the judge. He looked at the crowd, his eyes scanning for threats, his hand resting casually near the pistol on his hip. They walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted, but it was not a parting of the Red Sea. It was a reluctant shuffling of feet. Lily saw the faces. Mrs. Miller, the baker's wife, turned her back pointedly, pulling her shawl tight as if Lily were a contagious disease. A group of miners near the door muttered something about trouble and witch, spitting tobacco juice on the floor near Lily's hem. "Got what he deserved," one man whispered loud enough to be heard. "Losing his barn, losing his cattle, all for a saloon girl." The words stung, burying themselves like splinters in Lily's skin. She kept her chin high, refusing to flinch. She had walked through fire for this town. She would walk through their scorn. But then, near the door, she saw Mrs. Gable, the merchant's wife, who had handed her the water during the fire, stood with her 2 daughters. As Lily passed, Mrs. Gable did not turn away. She nodded. It was a stiff, brief motion, barely a dipping of the chin. But her eyes met Lily's. There was no warmth there, but there was no contempt. There was a recognition of a shared reality. Survival. Behind her. Old man Miller tipped his hat to Cole. "Good luck to you, Mercer," he rumbled. They stepped out into the blinding sunlight of the street. The air tasted of dust and freedom. "It is not enough," Cole said quietly, his jaw tight. "Trask should be in chains." "It is enough," Lily said. She took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, lungs that were no longer owned by anyone but herself. "He cannot touch me, Cole, and he knows it." I did not get an apology, but I got my life back. She felt a complicated weight settle in her chest. She was proud. She had stood up and spoken her truth. But she was also tired. A bone-deep weariness that made her knees tremble. Her reputation was still tattered. To half the town. She would always be the woman who lived in sin with the rancher. But as she looked at Cole, seeing the protective hunch of his shoulders and the way he positioned himself between her and the street, she realized that reputation was a currency she no longer cared to hoard. "Let us go home," she said. The ranch was exactly as they had left it, indifferent to the drama of courtrooms and judges. The wind whispered through the new grass, bending the green stalks in long, rippling waves. The clouds dragged vast, purple shadows over the distant hills, and the mountains watched in their silent, granite judgment. The earth did not care that Lily had been scandalized. It did not care that Cole had been shot. It cared only that the fences were down and the barn was a pile of black ash. They stood in the yard, looking at the charred ruins of the lean-to barn where the fire had started in town, and then at the work waiting for them here. "We have to rebuild," Cole said, looking at the empty space where the winter feed should have been stored. "Then we rebuild," Lily said. They started the next morning. It was grueling, backbreaking work, but it possessed a purity that the town lacked. There were no lies in a hammer and nail. There was no judgment in a saw. Cole felled the timber from the upper ridge, dragging the logs down with the draft horses. Lily stripped the bark, her hands becoming stained with sticky pine resin and hardened by calluses. They worked side by side under the fierce, unblinking eye of the sun. They moved with an easy rhythm now, a language of labor that required no words. When Cole struggled to lift a beam because of his healing shoulder, Lily was there instantly to take the weight. When Lily paused to wipe sweat from her brow, Cole handed her the canteen without breaking his stride. They were building more than a barn. With every post they set, with every nail they drove, they were nailing down their claim to this life and to each other. The love between them deepened not in grand speeches, but in the quiet, dusty spaces between chores. It was in the way Cole poured her coffee at dawn, remembering that she liked it with a splash of cold water to settle the grounds. It was in the way Lily's hand would brush against the small of his back as she passed him in the kitchen, a fleeting touch that said, "I am here." It was in the way Cole began to place an extra blanket on her side of the bedroll before he went to his pallet by the fire. He never commented on it. He just did it. And every morning, Lily would wake up warm, knowing he had thought of her comfort while the world outside froze. It was late May when the barn was finished. The smell of raw timber and sawdust hung sweet in the air. The sun was setting, turning the prairie into a rolling sea of molten gold and deep violet. Lily stood at the edge of the property, near the newly strung fence line. She leaned against a cedar post, watching the horizon. For months, this land had felt like a prison. The vastness had felt crushing, the isolation terrifying. She had looked at the horizon and seen only how far she was from civilization, from safety. Now, she looked at the horizon and saw an anchor. She saw the way the light hit the ridges, turning them the color of crushed plums. She heard the meadowlarks calling to one another, a piercing, joyful sound. She felt the wind, not as an assault, but as a caress. She was not trapped. She was free. She heard the crunch of boots on gravel behind her. She did not turn. She knew the sound of his walk, heavy, deliberate, uneven on the left side where a horse had kicked him years ago. Cole stopped a few feet behind her. He didn't speak. He just stood there, sharing the silence. "I used to hate this view," Lily said softly. "I used to think it looked like the end of the world." "And now?" Cole asked. "Now it looks like the beginning," she said. She turned to face him. The sunset painted his face in copper and shadow. He looked older than his years, worn by wind and violence, but his eyes were the steadiest thing she had ever known. "Cole," she said. "Yeah, I'm done sleeping alone," she said. The words hung in the quiet air. Cole went very still. He looked at her, searching her face for any sign of hesitation, any sign that she was speaking out of obligation or gratitude. "Lily," he said, his voice rough, "you do not owe me anything. Not for the barn, not for the court, not for any of it." "I know," Lily said. She took a step toward him. "That is why I am asking. Because I do not owe you. Because I want you." She reached out and took his hand. His palm was rough, scarred, and warm. "I want to share all of myself with you," she whispered. "Not because I have to, but because I finally can." Cole let out a breath that sounded like a breaking chain. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He pulled her closer, slowly, giving her every second to change her mind. "I have loved you since the moment you sang about the soldier," he confessed, his voice shaking. "I have loved you even when I thought I was just saving you." "Show me," Lily said. They walked back to the cabin in the gathering dusk, hand in hand, inside. The cabin was filled with blue shadows. Lily lit the lamp, turning the flame low. She turned to him. The moment was not like the romance novels she had read as a girl. It was not polished or perfect. It was charged with a terrifying, beautiful intensity. When Cole touched her, his hands were shaking. He touched her face, her shoulders, her waist, with a reverence that made her throat ache. He treated her as if she were made of spun glass, terrified that his roughness would shatter her. "You cannot break me, Cole," she whispered against his lips. "I am not glass, I am iron." She kissed him then, a fierce, hungry claim that swept away his hesitation. Their union was a collision of two lonely souls finally finding harbor. It was tender, yes, but it was also desperate and fierce. It was the release of years of holding back, years of being touched without consent, years of starving for a touch that meant love. There were tears. Lily cried, not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of being held by a man who asked for nothing she did not give freely. There was laughter, breathless and surprised, when they fumbled in their eagerness, and when they finally lay still, tangled together in the sheets. The wind howling outside felt miles away. Later, the lamp had burned down to a flicker. The room was dark, save for the embers in the hearth. Lily lay with her head on Cole's chest, listening to the steady thud of his heart. She traced the line of the scar on his shoulder with her fingertip. "Do you think they will ever accept us?" she asked into the darkness. "Really accept us?" Cole was silent for a long moment. His hand stroked her hair, a rhythmic, soothing motion. "No," he said honestly. "Some will, Mrs. Gable, Old Man Miller, but the rest, to them, I will always be the half-breed who stole a white woman, and you will be the woman who let him." Lily lifted her head to look at him. "Does that bother you?" "It used to," Cole said. "It used to eat a hole in my gut every time I walked down Main Street." He kissed her forehead. "But now, let them talk. Let them gossip in their parlors. They have their small lives and their small minds. We have this," he gestured to the room, to the ranch, to the space between them. "We built this, Lily. We carved it out of nothing. We fought fire and snow and men with guns to keep it. This ranch, this love, it is worth more than their approval. It is worth more than anything they have." Lily rested her head back on his chest. He was right. They had forged something in the fire that the town could never understand. "We could do more," she said softly, the idea forming in the quiet. "More? There are others?" Lily said. "Men like you who cannot find work because of their blood. Women like Sarah, who are trapped in places like the Golden Steer." She felt Cole's chest expand as he took a deep breath. "We could hire them," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Give them a place to start, a bunk and a wage, and maybe I could teach again, not in town, but here I could build a schoolhouse for the ranchers' children, for the children the town forgets." Cole was silent, digesting the vision. It was dangerous. It was bold. It was exactly the kind of defiance he understood. "Realism and stubborn hope," he murmured. "What?" "Something my mother used to say." Cole said, "You need both to survive the winter. Realism to know the cold is coming, and hope to believe the spring will follow." He tightened his arm around her. "We will build it," he promised. "A schoolhouse, a bunkhouse, a sanctuary." The months rolled by like the turning of a great wheel. Spring exploded into summer, bringing heat that shimmered off the hardpan and dust that coated everything in a fine, gray powder. The wildflowers withered, leaving behind sharp seeds and tough grass. Thunder rumbled over the mountains in July, bringing brief, violent storms that smelled of ozone and wet sage. They worked. They hired a young man named Silas, a quiet boy with a limp who had been turned away from every other ranch. They took in a stray dog that appeared at the porch one day. They started cutting timber for the schoolhouse. The town of Iron Ridge did not change overnight. Ben Trask reopened his saloon. Though the crowds were thinner, Sheriff Mallory was replaced by a hard-eyed marshal from Bismarck who brooked no nonsense. Some folks still crossed the street when Lily rode in for supplies. They still whispered. But others stopped to trade news about the weather or the price of beef. It was a slow, grinding thaw, measured in inches. Lily and Cole stood together through it all. When the heat was oppressive, they sought the shade of the cottonwoods. When the cattle market dropped, they tightened their belts and ate beans. They weathered the changes in the sky just as they had weathered the changes in their lives, standing up, side by side. It was late autumn again. The air had that familiar, crisp bite that warned of snow. Lily and Cole rode their horses up to the high ridge that overlooked the entire valley. The sun was setting, a spectacular collision of crimson and gold that set the western sky on fire. Below them, the ranch spread out like a map of their journey. The new barn stood tall and sturdy. The smoke curled lazily from the cabin chimney. The cattle were grazing in the lower pasture, fat and ready for winter. Lily looked at the land. It was hard country. It was a place that could kill the weak and break the careless. It had tried to break her. It had tried to freeze her, starve her, and shame her into dust. She took a deep breath of the cold air. "It did not win," she whispered to the wind. Cole heard her. He looked at her, sitting tall in the saddle. her hair touched with silver from the light, her face serene and strong. He reached over the space between their horses. Lily took his hand. They sat there as the sun dipped below the mountains, plunging the world into the blue shadow of twilight. They were two scarred souls, holding on to each other in a vast, indifferent world. The darkness was behind them, and the darkness was ahead of them. Winter was coming. Prejudice remained. Hardship was a guarantee, but as they turned their horses back toward the lights of the home they had built, they did not look afraid. They looked like people who had walked through hell and come out the other side carrying water. They rode down the hill together, leaving the ridge to the stars and the silence. Thank you for listening to this story of Lily and Cole. It has been a journey through the dust, the snow, and the resilience of the human heart. I hope their fight for dignity and love resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this tale of the American West, I encourage you to subscribe to From Wild West so you never miss a new story. Please share your thoughts in English. I read every comment and cherish the connection with you all. Until the next ride, keep your fences strong and your fires burning.